set it on my screen. So, that's on our screen, and then that's good. So the course description today, a growing amount of evidence links the condition of our built environment to individual health behaviors as well as broader public health outcomes. Fitwel Certification System and associated ambassadors program empower a range of practitioners to create a healthier future where every building is enhanced to support the well-being of occupants and the surrounding community. Developed by experts in public health and design, including advisors from the U.S. Centers for Disease Control and USGSA, Fitwel's evidence-based high-impact strategies support health and productivity in any project through targeted design and operational improvements. We'll also take an in-depth look at a case study project, this office, pursuing Fitwel certification, highlighting a commitment to improving the safety and health and well-being of the building occupants. Our course objectives for today, we will analyze the 7 health impact categories of Fitwel. So each of these standards that we've been talking through throughout the series has sort of different names for what they call their principles, and then Fitwel uses the term health impact categories. Those cover food, safety, activity, equity, well-being, community, and reduced morbidity and absenteeism. We're going to explain the process by which to implement Fitwel on an active project and how the various aspects of Fitwel increase productivity and health. And we'll learn about the practical design and operational strategies to create a healthy living environment for occupants through project's location, outdoor spaces, ground floor amenities, stairwells, shared spaces, among other opportunities. And participants will learn about a detailed case study of a DC-based commercial interior project in this office that is pursuing Fitwel built certification to address a range of health priorities. So we'll start off talking a bit about the Fitwel Ambassador Program. I myself have been a Fitwel Ambassador since January or February of 2019, so a good year before the pandemic put health on most people's radar. Our office was already getting involved with that. Unlike some of the other professional potentials, particularly I'm thinking Well AP, we just had someone in our office complete that, where you really got to memorize all kinds of particulate matter percentages, parts per million, and those sorts of details that the goal is to become a subject matter expert. The Fitwel Ambassador Program is really geared towards advocacy. I mean, there are references, there are studies to back up every credit, but becoming an ambassador is not really about memorizing the book. It's about learning the principles of healthy design and becoming that person in the room who can speak to them and advocate for them when the design is happening. The standard itself is more approachable just because it doesn't have the prerequisites. It's very much, they use the terms choose your own adventure. They want Fitwel to be something that anybody can apply. You can, whatever works for you, you achieve up to that level. And so naturally, of course, that means you don't have to keep track of what's a prerequisite, what's an optimization. It's very simple. Every credit is a credit, and you either get it or you don't. So the goal of the ambassador program here is to familiarize you in many ways with the process of becoming certified. So that's partly what I want to focus on today in this presentation. And so that way, anyone in the audience who might be interested in becoming an ambassador will sort of get a feel for what kind of scope they'll be looking at. Now, that being said, Fitwel does provide a ton of reference material. If you go on their website, they've got oodles of stuff. Some of it is public facing, some of it is exclusive to ambassadors. So yet another reason you may want to pursue that is just so you have access to those downloads of various white papers and studies that they've put out. And they're constantly adding more stuff. And we'll talk about a couple of those resources in the presentation. The other part is that the Well AP requires continuing education, and they don't really provide much in the way of it directly through IWBI. So you end up usually going with third-party providers, sometimes paying out of pocket to do that. Fitwel does not have a set continuing education requirement, but they do frequently host these webinars for free for ambassadors. I get emails probably every other month or so with something that they're hosting, and it's often about certification, recertification. There's one coming up, I think, just at the end of the month. Talking about sort of the renewal process on your certification, because we're now at the point where a lot of projects have done their initial certification, and now they're coming up on that 3-year window, and suddenly it's like, oh, okay, what's different about this versus the first time around? How do we do that? So I'm looking forward to that. Ultimately, it's up to you to make the most of your ambassadorship by identifying opportunities within your projects that you can promote health and science strategies. And I'll briefly talk here as well. I was going through this slide yesterday with Eric, one of our principals, who's also on our Healthy Communities Committee, and he recommended that I talk a little bit about this, because I think a lot of the folks in the audience will be interested to know that a lot of the client groups in this area, I've just selected ones that we see all the time, but there's many more on the list at Fitwel who have signed up for sort of volume certification of their existing portfolios of properties. ACTs like McGee Smith, Zudo, obviously very well known in this area. And so the firms, this is something that is generally targeted towards entities that actually own the buildings and are certified and involved. But in theory, an architecture firm, a small shop could also sign a champion, and it would get you a couple of benefits, including, and you can see at the bottom that 50% discount on Fitwel ambassador trainings. Now, I should say the ambassador thing is not very expensive to begin with. It's like $125, $150, and they did just run a back to school discount in September, so pretty reasonably priced, but something good to know. So jumping into the portal, this is really where the certification happens. And when you log in with your account, you'll have a dashboard looking something like this on the website. But until you actually register a project, all of these columns and nice graphs will be blank. So it's kind of a little hard to get into it. The registration fee, too much in cost, changing a little bit, but in general, it's $500 to register a project on the portal, and then about $6,000 or $7,000 to do the full certification. But so this is basically reflecting this office on my dashboard. See over here on the right, they're talking about those health impact categories. Those are going to be our 7 key topics that the sort of silos in which they categorize where you're seeing the impact of your design strategies. And so you can see, just based on our office, advanced, there we go. Obviously getting huge opportunities here. 66% of the credits that are possible to achieve impacts around community health, even higher with those impact physical activity. Some 80% are being targeted by this office. So in the categories, we start with community health. Community health is focused on the residents of a geographic area. It's a medical specialty that focuses on both the mental and the physical well-being of the residents in that area. It's a key area of public health and consists of programs to assist community members in maintaining and enhancing their health, preventing the spread of infectious disease, and preparing for natural disasters. I will mention here, I didn't put a lot in the presentation about it, but they do also have a viral response module, which is an add-on to the core Fitwel certification that's based on the pandemic. And so that infectious disease angle, they've kind of drawn that out, made it a standalone thing that you can certify under. And then if you've already done that, some of those credits will transfer over to the main certification. So that can give you a kind of a jump start if you go that route. Working at the community level, and that's really a recurring theme in Fitwel, fosters healthy living, and it provides the greatest health benefits to the highest number of people who need it, and aids in the prevention of chronic disease. So those are really the focuses of Fitwel. It's looking to benefit the greatest number of people. It's looking to a prevention of chronic disease, primarily through activity, and that in turn is reducing the severity of transmitted infectious disease and acute disease. Right? The statistics are very clear that the vast majority of both mortality and just ongoing healthcare costs in this country are the result of chronic diseases, things like type 2 diabetes, heart disease, and those sorts of conditions, which can be prevented or delayed substantially with basic lifestyle improvements. And so trying to target those. The next category is morbidity and absenteeism. And this really is part of the business case for Fitwel. It comes out of the origins of Fitwel, where with, as I said at the beginning, the GSA, the General Services Administration, and the CDC. So they were looking to create an evidence-based standard that they could apply to buildings in the federal office building portfolio. And they did that, they made it, they benchmarked their buildings, they got lots of great information out of that, and made changes to places based on that so that we can have a healthier workforce that was taking fewer days off for sickness and all of that. And that was great. And they realized they had something that could be marketed out to the broader world and didn't just stay in the silo of the federal government. That wasn't really their core competency. So they partnered with the Center for Access to Design, which is a nonprofit group out of New York. That was originally set up, I think, by Bloomberg, and now they are the ones who operate the Fitwel standard for social equity. Ensures that all people in a community have access to the same opportunities, and it's looking at strategies for promoting health by reducing existing barriers. So this one is kind of more on the policy side. And it's looking at the range of exclusionary practices and obstacles that are preventing people and groups from using and accessing health and social services, engaging in economic activity, and anything that might affect that is a goal of this. So it's looking at things like credits around accessible routes, particularly accessible routes to transit, the availability of transit near your project. Pricing incentives for transit, for healthy food options, and sort of targeted health promotion activities to sort of bring in a larger audience of people, again, trying to reach that largest number of people. Well-being, the impact category is really focused on the feeling of health and vitality that originates from your behaviors and your experiences. When we're in a state of well-being, we usually feel happy, socially connected, healthy, and purposeful. An individual's sense of well-being is essential to their general health, since it enables them to overcome obstacles, reach their life goals, and carry out daily tasks successfully. People who are emotionally healthy experience fewer negative emotions and recover from setbacks more quickly. So there's a resilience aspect to it. The strategies that we'll be looking at that instill these feelings of well-being, inclusion, relaxation, and perceptions of safety. Spaces, the interior spaces, having common spaces, and in this space, which we call the sunroom, and I think you're seeing on the Torti Gallas video thumbnail, is actually one of the spaces that we included in our submission for this office as a multi-purpose space. There's a collapsible wall along that side that can open up, and this room can be used for a variety of activities, but it's got great daylight views and trees out the back. So lots of things there contributing to well-being and opportunities for social engagement. Next one is healthy food. A nutritious and balanced meal plan enhances or maintains general health. So providing the right amount of fluids, macronutrients, and vitamins, fiber are all important. And really, this is targeting issues where there are major impediments to have a healthy diet, because really that contributes seriously to these chronic conditions again. We was looking at things like food deserts. You've got promoting access to affordable, healthy food options, farmers markets. What is taken into account by a general walk score, which we'll add, is also important both for the getting people out and walking to a destination to get the food, and also the availability of healthy options when you get to the grocery store. This is something that it really struck me, and I was talking about this with a group. It's not the first thing you think of, but when you walk or have groceries within walking distance of you, you actually shop healthier too, because you go more frequently and buy in smaller quantities the fresh things that you're going to eat the next couple days, because you can always walk out for and get something, have something. Whereas when I was living further from a grocery store, getting in a car, driving, it became this whole event. If I'm going to go, I'm going to stock up for the next 3 weeks. Well, after the first week, you've eaten all the fresh produce, you're down to the frozen foods and things in boxes, the processed stuff. So there is a definite correlation that maybe wasn't immediate obvious, but it's very real between the access to food and the actual mix of foods that you are consuming. The next one is occupant safety. This is looking at risks like traffic, crime, and accidental injury. So proper lighting in the exterior areas, having good task lighting in offices such as this, so that distributing to strain and headaches and everything from inadequate lighting. You've got the stair safety. So part of Fitwel is very much about incentivizing people to take the stairs, but it's also about making sure that these stairs are safe, visible, and good contrast, not reflective surfaces, all sorts of details like that that can contribute to people using the stairs safely. It also involves things like protecting bicyclists and pedestrians, having safe storage locations for bicycles. When people bike here to the office, we have a storage room, keep your bike securely during the day, and then we have personal lockers and shower for anyone that's make use of that. And then the last health impact category we have is physical activity, and this again kind of goes through everything else that the standard is working on. It just walking around has been shown across many studies that it lowers risk of at least 20 chronic diseases. I didn't even know there were 20 chronic diseases, but if you start digging into it, you find so many things to be avoided with just getting out, walking about, having destinations within walking distance that you want to get to, and having what they call active transportation options to get to them. That includes basically anything other than getting in a car by yourself and sitting in the non-HOV lane down 70. If you're walking, if you're biking, if you're on a scooter, if you're even going up and down the escalators, the metro station, it's all active transportation. More of that, the better. All right, so that kind of covers the health impact categories. I'll just quickly pause here. Did we have any questions so far? No? Okay. So I'll talk a little bit about so
far, but everyone put stuff in the chat if you do have questions.
Yeah, please, if you have any questions, feel free to drop it in the chat. So now we'll look a bit at choosing a scorecard. The scorecards are essentially just different collections of credits that are appropriate for different building typologies. There are, of course, on the left here, we have all the different building standards that are available under Fitwel, site scorecards, community, commercial, industrial. Community is basically anything in a residential building. Commercial, industrial is what the kind of single use campuses. So those sites look at larger areas, on a scale of acres, a neighborhood, a master plan, corporate campus, that kind of thing. The building scores are individual buildings, and having individual buildings certified can contribute to a site certification, but again, because there's some prerequisites, it's not required, unlike some other standards. The newest one is the senior housing scorecard, pretty self-explanatory name there. The other ones, and what they kind of group these under what's called a workplace template, and that includes the multi-tenant base building. So that's kind of by base building we mean almost like a core and shell would be the terminology I think the lead uses. So that's looking at the underlying building, and then you have the multi-tenant whole building. That's if you were doing the entirety of it. You have the single tenant building, and then you have the commercial interior space, which is actually what our office is certifying under, where we're really a tenant within a multi-tenant building. Then there's the retail scorecard, which they actually consider under workplaces, and it's actually mostly geared to looks towards the employees of the retail establishment more so than patrons. I mean, obviously there are things that will benefit the patrons in the process, but it's really focused on the employees. And then the last one here is the multi-family residential building scorecard, and that one is actually what kind of got us interested as a firm in Fitwel to begin with. The bulk of our work is in the multi-family world, and when we started looking at moving to this new office, I said, well, let's look at doing a health certification. And we were kind of looking between Fitwel and Well, and at the time, Well was still very much in the beta of working with multifamily residential, and it was still very much 1.5 feet firmly planted into the office work. And we were doing an office, but we wanted to do an office that would get us experience working with a standard that would also have applicability to our multifamily clients. And so that was kind of what turned us towards the Fitwel direction. So just kind of this one, the commercial interior. This is applicable to contiguous spaces within a commercial building that are occupied or controlled by tenants. This is a snip from a document they put together, which is called the Submission Workbook. This is one of those resources that they make available to ambassadors. It's a phenomenal resource. I rely heavily on it in preparing the documentation for this office. And you can see here, it takes you through every step of how you go about selecting this. And you can see for different building typologies, they tell you which scorecard is the appropriate scorecard to use. So, student housing falls under a multifamily residential. A stadium or arena is actually under retail, because what they're doing is they're certifying the concessions, the restrooms, the sort of under the grandstand part of the building. So that's how they categorize it. Schools are deemed as workplace, and so it could go under any of those multi-tenant base building or multi-tenant whole building or single tenant building, depending on the sort of characterization of the school environment. And library, interestingly, they also have retail. So some of those not necessarily intuitive, but they have it all spelled out, and very easy to find what you want to work with. They also, this is a different document. This is called the strategy alignment, and this is just going down credit by credit. I've just pulled a couple of the sections that they break this into. They have 12 sections that they divide the credits into. This is building access, section 2, and the green column is the multifamily residential column, and I guess the senior living as well. So residential is the green column, the blue in the middle is, I think, the retail, and the purple on the left is the workplace. So some credits are applicable to workplaces and to retail, and some are residential specific. Some will happen in both. You can see the bicycle parking is an example of a credit that across all the different building typologies, that's something they include in strategy. And this is another one they call workplaces and dwellings. So here, the only credit in common is views of nature. That, of course, goes for everywhere. The original research on views of nature was actually done in hospitals. It was looking at that. It time to recovery and people being, a success for the hospital of getting you discharged. And they were finding that people who were in rooms of use of nature were actually recovering faster than those not. So since then, of course, that line of research has been expanded, and that they found a good reason to apply it to just about everything. The other thing you'll notice in this table that gets a little complicated are those decimal numbers under the credit numbers. And you'll see that for each strategy, it may have a different point value weighting depending on whether this is for workplace certification or residential. And essentially what they're doing there is they have two things they're considering, and then they're applying a weighted average across all of it. So they take the strength of the evidence for a health benefit, meaning the number of studies, the credibility of those studies. They don't know how they come up with these numbers exactly, but they assign a value to that quality of the evidence. And then they also assign a value to the health impact that design strategy has. So something that is, well, it makes you feel a little better when you get up in the morning. That's a small health impact. Something that's like, well, you're either dead or you're not. That's a huge health impact. So within that, obviously there's a spectrum of how much benefit you get from this strategy and how strong the evidence for that benefit is. They take those two values that they produce on some sort of, gradation. They multiply them together to get a product, and that product is kind of the raw point value for that credit. Then they take, because all of the standards, as you can see, have different applicable credits and different total numbers of credits available to them, but all of the scoring is done on a set number of points. They then scale those relative point weightings for each standard to a different one. So you can see here under views of nature, in the workplace, having views of nature gets you 2.8. In the residential, it only gets you 1.65. Now, in the underlying raw score for views of nature hasn't changed. All that's happened is there's more credits available for residential buildings than there are for workplaces. And so it's just being divided by a larger denominator when they go to the average. So we'll talk a little bit about some of those strategies. There are, it says here, 55 plus. Again, that's kind of starts with whatever scorecard has the fewest number, but many of them have far more than that available. They're all, as we said, based on studies, based on actual evidence, and they're both design and operational. I've been talking more so about design strategies. That is tendency as architects to focus on design because that's where we really sell. But operational is an important part of this as well. So each strategy is associated with those point allocations, and of course the buildings with more points for more in the final system, which is based on stars. So there's 1 star, 2 star, and 3 stars for the different benchmarks. So 1-star building, even base certification, is meant to represent an above median level of health promotion for them. So it's kind of there, and then by the time you get to 3 stars, that's an exception. This audit here, I believe it's really on the cusp of 2 stars. It's kind of in the better than average range of promotion. We've actually got our comments back, and you'll see some of that as we go through these strategies. So the first strategy we're going to talk about, 1.1, the very beginning, is the walk score. There's actually 3, 1.1, 1.2, 1.3, are all just walk score threshold 50, 70, and 90. This office, I think it bounces around every time I check it, but it's between a 97 and a 99 in our neighborhood. So we're in a really great walkable location. And that's giving us quite a few points. You can see the evidence that one of the reasons that walk score gets you so many points is, like I said, is based on the studies. And because the walk score is available nationwide, it's an algorithm, it's a very easy to access objective number. Lots of researchers love to use walk score in their studies as just a quick and dirty way as a proxy for other amenities in an area. If you don't have a walk score at that threshold, you might be able to make a case that there's some alternative compliance ways to do that, but generally walk score is the best metric for that. You can see over here on the right, this is again all from the dashboard, and there is these little icons on the side that tell you which of the health impact categories this credit is benefiting. So for the location of walkability is impact physical activity, the occupant safety, absenteeism, morbidity, and the well-being. And then this is kind of expanding that strategy requirements and documentation. They provide this for every credit in the dashboard, and it's based on the comments we get, it's very by the book. There's not a lot of ambiguity here. It's quite clear what you need to do, what you need to provide them with to show that you've done it, and they will look for all the stuff in this list. So, the basic requirements, as I said here, you either have the walk score of 50, or you can do it this roundabout way by establishing within a half-mile radius. You have these various amenities, and then you provide either the copy of the walk score or an annotated map to do that. So then the next credit here that I'm looking at is 2.5. This is providing regular occupants access to a transit benefit. And so this is one that is an operational strategy rather than a design strategy. It's looking at something that you're doing to provide your residents or your tenants with an incentive to use the active transit options available to them. Now this one, we have selected yes, but you can see it's in yellow, and that's because we got comments back. And also these little categories are grayed out over here. So again, it would affect physical activity, social equity, again, by providing this benefit, you're kind of level the playing field, making it easy for people who don't have a car, means to get there to take transit and use that and community health. Obviously, when people use transit, that's a public good for everyone. So what happened was we had submitted this using our flexible spending program, and it turns out that was actually also able to be used for parking, and so we got this comment that was not a viable program for purposes of that credit. Oops, I'll just go back to main screen here. But we have another trick in our pocket. We've got our capital bike share corporate membership, which also provides our employees with a discounted bike share membership. So we're going to submit that to them when we do our comment responses at the end of the week here, and that will hopefully answer that in a satisfactory way. So that's kind of looking on the operational side. I will say that one of the things I've noticed is that as architects, we're really good about the design strategies. We love design strategies. Operational strategies are where it becomes a walking the walk kind of thing. And for us in our own office, having to apply some of that is that's where the next kind of level of commitment is. I can see that when come recertification time in a couple of years, we may be looking at some of that more scrutiny. The next one I want to talk about here is a design strategy for access to natural daylight. Again, this was one of those strategies that is under the workspaces category. It's not available under the multifamily standard. And of course, the reason for that is you basically can't legally build a bedroom without access to natural light. So there wouldn't be much point in using it as a credit because every unit's going to have that anyway, and it would just be a given. So, but on offices, I guess theoretically you could build a horrible office. So to prevent that, they offer you this credit. This one again, pretty decent weighting, 2.24 points. It's affecting the absenteeism and morbidity, obviously, and well-being. Brighter and cheerier your office is, the more people want to come and spend time in it. And for this one I've shown the requirements because this is one of the more complicated ones for actually documenting. And I wanted to kind of share some of the documentation we went through to get this. So it's at its basic level, asking you to include access to natural daylight for a minimum of 51% of all the following regularly occupied spaces within a project. And so these are terms that come up a lot in the Fitwel standard. You've got regular occupants and regularly occupied spaces. So regular occupants is basically, in this case, your full-time employees. For a multifamily building, it would be the residents of the multifamily building. The number of those occupants can affect the requirements for certain credits. And then the spaces is basically, this is looking at either residential units, in the case of multifamily, or here it's workspaces and common spaces, meaning something like this break room or a conference room, but it would not include things like the corridors and the restrooms. So that's sort of what it is, and then they spell out all of this from depending on north and south facing versus east and west facing windows, how high the windows are. We're very fortunate here, the windows are high, which brings daylight into the space. And you go through all these calculations, or at the very bottom, you can just show that you got the lead credit for daylighting, and then that solves all your trouble. You don't have to do any of this. So that's a really handy. Occasionally, you'll see one of those release ratings in there in the standard. It can save you some real time on certifying if you've already done it for lead. So this, again, I want to jump back to that Fitwel submission workbook that we looked at earlier, because this is really showing some of the information that goes into creating these documents. And this one here, this is the initial page. This is really just, are you going design or build? Are you doing a site or building, right? It has all the information for how you decide which path you're taking. And then as you go further along in this workbook, it actually gets into details of how you do calculations, what kind of letterhead format they're looking for to present that information. And then when you're doing a floor plan diagram and you're shading areas, all of that, what to include, what to show, how to format it, it's all very nicely spelled out. And so we were able to use that and create this table with our calculations, with our shaded floor plan of where are regularly occupied spaces, what are circulation and stairs and bathrooms not regularly occupied, and then using that to show that yes, we have 51.65% daylit area in the plan according to their format. I think our office is a lot more daylit than 51%. What they're really calculating there is, do you have enough daylight to constitute task lighting during normal daylight hours without the use of artificial lighting? And that actually probably does line up pretty well with what I see in our office, which is we have these lights in the ceiling, which are on dimming sensors, and when it senses that the natural light is sufficient, it can actually dim down or turn off those lights entirely if they're not needed. So usually that first bank of maybe one or two desks in from the windows will actually see that happen on a particular sunny day. And then of course the other part of the documentation is they want annotated photographs. So here we're showing some of the views of the different studio spaces in our office, and obviously the quality of daylight that we're getting at those desks. With the shades down. With the shades down, that's, yes, these are partial translucency of the shades, still giving a significant amount of daylight. You mentioned that on that photo of the north studio, there aren't shades on that. The folks over there didn't request them because they're north facing and they never get direct glare. They just like the skylight. But for Fitwel, that wasn't good enough to get the optical shading credit. So we're passing on that one. But that's pretty small. And then the last one here I was going to focus on, again, this is kind of in the operational realm. This is prepared food areas, is the category 10 here. The grouping of credits. This is the only one in that area where we didn't go for alternative compliance. So generally in the workplace, these points are oriented around when you have like a cafeteria or non-site actual food service providing that for employees. We have a little kitchenette space here, but we don't have actual food service. It's just bring your own lunch bag and heat it up kind of thing. So for most of the points on this, it's just sort of a pass. It's what's called alternative compliance. For this one, if you don't have that, you actually have to adopt a standard that has very specific requirements, and it would apply to all catering and events. So every lunch line provider that come in here would have to sign on to this thing. And it's far too complicated to try to manage that at that granular of a level. So we passed on this one, but you can see that it is a huge number of points at 4.19 just for this one credit, and that's because of the importance that they do place on a healthy diet and what you can do with that. Looks like I missed a little. It's supposed to be a healthy foods option over here, but so again, they have this reference to is at least as rigorous as the Fitwel food and beverage standard. And they have different type A, type B is when it's provided on-site or off-site and so forth. And that standard is right here. It's a document. It's on their website. Again, for ambassadors, you get all of the details, every last little description, what counts as a beverage, how many calories per serving. There's like 12 pages in this document, but it's all right there. And basically, you just have to copy what they say and agree to it. So that's the documentation for that. So with that, we're at about 12:50 here. I will just kind of close on this note that, as was mentioned at the beginning, we will be having a tour of the Torti Gallas Partners office here at the Grimke School on Vermont Avenue Northwest on November 15th. And I believe that's starting at 6 o'clock. There will be a little reception after the tour, and it will be getting, I believe, another 1.5 learning units of AIA credit. So please do sign up for that. We look forward to seeing everyone here and showing off the office.
Thank you, Matthew. This was terrific, really helpful. So again, if anyone has questions, raise your hand. I'm not sure if you can unmute yourselves. If not, let me know and I'll unmute you or put it in the chat. But I do have a really quick introductory question for you.
Mm-hmm.
Why is it spelled that way?
Why is it spelled as Fitwel with one L?
Yes. Because my autocorrect wants to correct it every single time.
Always, yes. I have the same problem. I'm not entirely sure. I think somebody was probably just trying to trademark something distinctive, and or maybe well with 2 L's was already taken. So
it's already taken. Right. Well, so this was great. I also wonder, do you have any sense of how many, so is this I should know this, and you may have touched on it, and I'm sorry if I missed it, but do you have any sense on if this is a US based is this a US based program or is it global?
It definitely started out US based, and I would venture that the vast majority of buildings certified under it are in the US, but it is available globally and it can be used, yes, internationally.
Okay.
There are some buildings that do have it. One of the great resources they have on the site is actually case studies for a whole bunch of buildings that are certified, and I'm pretty sure there's a couple of offices in London and some in East Asia as well that have also certified.
Okay. And how many projects do you think are current? Do you know a fact like that, or do they have information?
How many worldwide?
Yeah.
So, they send out a summary at the end of every calendar year, kind of trumpeting their growth over the past year. I want to say it's somewhere in the ballpark of 15 or 16,000 buildings.
Okay.
Total, but I could be off about that.
Well, it's really encouraging to see all of these developers in the area that are getting on board with it, because right, this just like really has to be like a ground up discussion, right? And it has to be something that everyone on the team is invested in, and especially in, as you mentioned, the long-term maintenance and running and operations of the building. There's so much impact there also. Would you mind just speaking a little bit about how, like, what are the first steps that one might take if they wanted to become a Fitwel ambassador?
So, I mean, you can just go to the website. They have a program there that's, you know, a study package that you can get and look through it. It's really not that intimidating. So, you know, just encourage you to check it out. There may be some stuff on YouTube or something. I don't know. My wife just got done studying for project management professional. And I know there's a million people out there providing study videos and tips for that one, because I think they get continuing credit for posting videos of themselves or something. So there's probably something similar out there for Fitwel. I haven't dug into it. It's been a couple of years since I did the ambassador training, and when I did it, it wasn't nearly as well known as it is today, but I'm sure there's a lot of material out there.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, I think that would be helpful if anyone wanted to get in. So, like, if I could summarize, I would say, you know, Fitwel and Well are both kind of next gen conversations that, you know, originally started with LEAD, and it's sort of trying to embark from that, but also kind of capitalize on the momentum from that, but maybe make the game a little bit larger and more inclusive. And what I think I hear you saying is that, you know, if you were deciding between those two, Fitwel is a little bit more approachable of a certification, or even to become an ambassador, and more approachable to get certification for a building. Is that kind of a fair?
Yeah, I would agree with that, and I think that Well has certainly some advantages and things to recommend it, and the biggest difference is really on the performance verification side, right? What Well tries to do is in many ways atone for the mistakes of LEAD. Well is a partnership with the same GBRI folks who do LEAD now, and LEAD always has been, you know, the criticism is that it started out on the design side and it does things, but there's not a lot of follow-up after the fact to see if the buildings were actually performing at the levels that the modeling said they would when you design it. And of course, over time, they've had to create that and build it into the standard to make it more robust and to kind of answer that criticism. And so, Well, from the very beginning, you know, even in the original beta formulation that they released, was always you have a third-party commissioning person who comes in and checks your air and checks your water and does all this stuff. And that's an added cost to you, this third-party certifying, and on the design team that, you know, if they don't pass the water testing, well, then they've got to come back in 6 months and test it again. And so there is more going on there for Well that Fitwel does not have, but for that reason, it's also maybe a bit more prestigious in the if you do make it through the gauntlet of all that testing. So our recommendation usually to clients is know your market, right? It's if you're working with a Class A office space that you're trying to lease to a Fortune 500 company that is going to be, you know, has a whole team of in-house people who are just dedicated to looking over this stuff, they're going to want the performance verification of the third-party performance tester. If it's multifamily residential, where you're essentially leasing to individual private citizens, the Fitwel is probably something that they will be quicker to grasp and understand the immediate benefits to them of living in this building. And that was something that Pearl up in Silver Spring, which is one of the champions earlier in this, was the tower companies. That's one of their properties just off the Blair development there southeast West Highway. Is that right? Yeah. That was actually the first Fitwel certified multifamily building in the world. And they started building it before the standard was released. They designed it to LEED Gold, and then as it was coming to completion, they realized that they had really gone above and beyond what LEED was asking. They were looking for some way to recognize what they were trying to accomplish with that, which is really meant to be the flagship of their repositioning that entire parcel. And they found Fitwel, and they said, this is the perfect fit. It's part of that. And they went for it, and they certified the building. And there was a number of the operational strategies that they had to adjust to make that, but the design was there. So that was something. And when you walk through that building, we had a tour through ULI years ago. You feel it. You really do. You can tell immediately that any resident walking into this building can tell this building is different. This is not just your average apartment building, and I feel better living here. So
Well, that's nice.
yeah,
That's good when it's perceivable. I like that.
Yeah.
We only have another minute or so. I just want to offer that, or I'm going to give Bo's offer here that he's you can contact him if 10 or more, sorry, Bo, want to sign up to become a Fitwel ambassador. We can do it at a cheaper rate. So contact Bo Green if you want to become a Fitwel ambassador, and it can become a whole partnership. And then I just wanted to say one more thing that I felt was pretty distinctive between these two programs, because they do seem to be the two that sort of are most parallel track of all of the ones that we're looking at right now, is that this one has done a really good job of targeting the multifamily housing market versus although I do think is doing a good job of venturing into that territory, but Fitwel has kind of focused on that. And tell me if I'm wrong about that, but that's my understanding. So project typology really does make a difference depending on which certification you're looking for.
Typology absolutely will influence which standard you go for. And I would agree that Fitwel is the more established and has the more thorough focus on multifamily at this point. Of course, does have their pilot programs for that, but it's not quite as big. I think maybe when we get around to it, I believe it's on version 2 or 2.1 or 2.2 now. I think maybe when they get to 3.0, that might be the time to really dive in with multifamily there. But my sense at this time is that it's not quite fleshed out yet.
Okay. So listen, thank you so much, Matthew, for this presentation. As he mentions, we'll have this office tour at Torti Gallas on November 15th. You can already sign up for it on the Potomac Valley website. I'm sure that we'll have email things sent around to give you a chance to just directly sign up for it, but we'd love to see you there. And thank you for joining us during this seminar. And thank you so much, Matthew, for giving us your time and your expertise. This has been really helpful. Can people reach out to you if they have questions or comments about, or if they just have questions about or comments?
Yes, just mbalky@tortigallas.com. Very easy. I might be able to type it in the chat. Yeah.
Okay, great. So mbalky@tortigallas.com, but I think he's putting it in the chat. All right, I'm going to stop the recording.